What happens when one of the most celebrated voices in opera, the great Jessye Norman, falls silent forever? Jessye Norman wasn't just an opera singer, she was a force. A five-time Grammy winner, a trailblazer who refused to be boxed into a single vocal category. And yet, behind the standing ovations and presidential honors, was a woman who defied the unspoken rules written for black women in classical music, and paid the price for her independence. So, how did she spend her final years? What happened to her $5 million fortune? And why does her former residence now sit forgotten? Stay with us as we uncover the legacy, the solitude, and the sad truth behind Jessye Norman's abandoned house, her remarkable net worth, and the final chapter of a voice the world will never forget. Jessye Mae Norman was born on September 15, 1945, in Augusta, Georgia. She was one of 4 children raised by Silas and Janie Norman. Growing up black in the Deep South during the era of segregation meant that the world around her was marked by limits and injustice. But inside her home, things were different. The Norman family was relatively well off and deeply aspirational, creating an environment that was warm, nurturing, and filled with music. Sunday lunches were sacred, and the Baptist church was central to their lives. It was there, in that church, that young Jessye first began to sing. At just 7 years old, she entered a choir competition and placed 3rd, even though she forgot the 2nd stanza. It didn't matter. Her gift was already shining through. Around that same time, something else captured her imagination: opera. With a radio of her own, Jessye began tuning in to the Metropolitan Opera's Saturday matinee broadcasts. The first opera she ever heard was Lucia de Lammermoor, and it made a lasting impression. While most 9-year-olds were listening to children's songs, Jessye was completely drawn into the world of bel canto and complex operatic storytelling. By Monday, she was eagerly talking about what she'd heard, sharing it with her classmates. It was during high school that a teacher recognized just how special her voice was. That teacher entered her into the Marian Anderson Award competition in Philadelphia. Marian Anderson, a trailblazing contralto and the first black singer to perform at the Met, was a powerful symbol for Jessye. Although she didn't win the competition, the journey proved pivotal. On the way back, the same teacher took Jessye to Howard University to meet with a vocal coach. The staff at Howard were so moved by her talent that they offered her a full scholarship on the spot. Attending Howard, a historically black university often called the Harvard of African Americans, was prestigious on its own, but receiving a full scholarship made it even more remarkable. At Howard, Jessye thrived. She sang in the university choir, gave recitals throughout Washington, and began auditioning professionally. It was an exciting and formative time in her life. After graduating, she continued her musical education at the Peabody Conservatory, though she found the atmosphere there far more cutthroat. Her big break came when she met the renowned French baritone and teacher Pierre Bernac. He became her mentor, introducing her to the intricacies of French art song. Under his guidance, Jessye developed into a master interpreter of the French repertoire, an identity that would stay with her throughout her extraordinary career. In 1968, while still a graduate student, Jessye Norman took a bold step and traveled to West Germany to compete in the international music competition of the German Broadcasting Corporation in Munich. Her performance left a lasting impression, so much so that she walked away with first prize. It was a pivotal moment in her early career, one that would launch her onto the international stage. Just a year later, she made her professional operatic debut at Berlin's prestigious Deutsche Oper, performing the role of Elisabeth in Wagner's Tannhäuser. She poured everything into that performance. In fact, during the intermission, the musical director was so moved by her talent that he visited her dressing room and offered her a full 3-year contract on the spot. Jessye accepted, and thus began her remarkable journey as a rising opera star in Europe. She was electric on stage, commanding attention with every note. It was a breakthrough moment that affirmed what many already believed. Jessye Norman was made for the grandeur of Strauss and Wagner. Elizabeth, with its vocal demands and emotional depth, was the ideal role to begin her journey into the Wagnerian repertoire. At the Deutsche Oper, which operates as a repertory company, singers are assigned roles throughout the season rather than performing in long, consecutive runs. This gave Jessye the freedom to explore different roles, travel across Europe, and build her reputation one performance at a time. Her curiosity and drive didn't stop there. She frequently returned to classic pieces, including Mozart's Dove Sono from Le Nozze di Figaro, which remained part of her repertoire for many years. Though she often received advice on what repertoire would suit her best, Jessye always trusted her own instincts. That inner compass led her to Florence in 1970, where she performed Handel's rarely heard Oratorio Deborah. The audience was captivated. For them, Jessye wasn't just a performer, she was a revelation. Jessye often acknowledged that the opportunities she found in Europe would not have been available to her in the United States at the time. In Germany, she was able to grow as an artist away from the pressure of the American spotlight. It gave her the space to refine her technique, master the German language, and develop her voice on her own terms. Looking back, it's clear that waiting to debut in the U.S. was the right decision. Had she rushed to the Met too soon, the glare of fame might have outpaced her artistic maturity. Instead, Jessye Norman built something enduring, one breathtaking role at a time. In Europe, Jessye Norman found the artistic freedom and support she needed to grow, steadily, thoughtfully, into the operatic legend she would one day become. Germany, in particular, held a special place in her heart. She loved the country deeply. One of the most transformative experiences of her life came when she visited East Berlin. What she witnessed there, the degradation, the oppression, and yet the unrelenting desire of the people to make music under the harshest conditions, left a profound impression on her. It expanded her perspective, not only as an artist, but as a human being. That emotional connection to Germany never faded. It remained a vital part of her identity throughout her life. By this time, her reputation had soared. Philips Records approached her to record the role of the Countess for their prestigious Mozart series, an incredible honor, especially for someone still relatively early in her career. Yet Jessye was already known for her breathtaking voice, her commanding stage presence, and a grace that made her unforgettable to audiences. Then came 1972, a monumental year for Jessye Norman. She was invited to make her debut at the legendary La Scala in Milan, performing the title role in Aida. To be invited to sing Aida at La Scala is one of the highest honors in opera, and she rose to the moment magnificently. That same year, she also made her debut at London's Royal Opera House Covent Garden as Cassandra in Berlioz's The Trojans. Later in her career, she would return to that stage, earning widespread acclaim for her performance in the title role of Ariadne of Naxos, a role that became one of her signature achievements in the 1980s. Jessye was more than a voice. She had an instrument that was not only powerful and expressive, but paired with a face that radiated emotion. In opera, audiences expect it all: vocal beauty, dramatic presence, and visual storytelling. Jessye delivered on every level. Watching her perform was as moving as hearing her sing. Those who saw her live never forgot it. Her performances as Elizabeth in Tannhäuser and Ariadne of Naxos at Covent Garden were unforgettable. These roles fit her voice like a glove, showcasing her warmth, strength, and commanding artistry. Beyond the technical brilliance, she possessed something more rare: a quiet magnificence. Jessye Norman wasn't just a singer, she was a presence. In January 1973, Jessye Norman gave her first major performance in New York City as part of Lincoln Center's prestigious Great Performers series. The anticipation surrounding her arrival was palpable, and the New York Times was quick to praise her artistry, calling her a performer of remarkable intelligence and emotional depth. For New York audiences, it was the long-awaited arrival of a singer whose reputation had already taken Europe by storm. Jessye later reflected that had she not gone abroad, her story might have been very different. She once joked that without Europe, she'd probably be waiting tables in New York and beating her brains out at auditions. At the time, the American classical music scene simply didn't offer the same opportunities for a young black woman with operatic dreams. Throughout her life, Jessye remained acutely aware of those who had paved the way. She frequently spoke of the African-American trailblazers who came before her, icons like Jackie Robinson, Marian Anderson, and Mattie Wilda Dobbs, acknowledging how their courage made her own path just a little more possible. While many African-American sopranos of her era focused on the Italian repertoire, Verdi and Puccini, Jessye carved out a unique space of her own. She devoted much of her career to French and German repertoire, distinguishing herself with a vocal and interpretive style that was both bold and refined. France, in particular, embraced her with open arms. She became a beloved figure there, even invited to sing La Marseillaise during the bicentenary of the French Revolution, a moment of deep national significance. In the eyes of many, she had become an honorary Frenchwoman. In 1975, Jessye relocated to London and took a 5-year break from the opera stage to focus on lieder recitals. She immersed herself in the works of Strauss, Brahms, and other composers, bringing to each piece a sense of nobility and grace. At its peak, Jessye Norman's voice was nothing short of elemental. Listeners often described it as a waterfall, massive, powerful, and seemingly endless. It had the grandeur of nature itself, evoking awe the way Victoria Falls might. Jessye Norman's long-awaited debut at the Metropolitan Opera finally came in 1983, and it couldn't have been more symbolic. It was the opening night of the Met's 100th anniversary season, and Jessye took the stage as Cassandra in Berlioz's Les Troyens. For the girl who had once huddled next to a radio in Augusta, Georgia, listening to Met broadcasts with wide-eyed wonder, this was more than a performance. It was destiny fulfilled. On stage, she was nothing short of majestic. Jessye's voice, with its immense richness and power, could soar over even the most thunderous Wagnerian orchestras. But it wasn't just her sound. It was the way she carried herself, with a statuesque presence that drew all eyes to her the moment she entered the stage. As Cassandra, her character dies in the first act. Yet even after she left the stage, critics and audience members alike said her presence remained. The echo of her voice, the emotional weight of her performance, it filled the opera house long after the curtain fell. That lingering energy became one of the most unforgettable tributes to her artistry. Just a year later, in 1984, Jessye was honored with one of France's most prestigious awards. She was named Commander of the Ordre des Arts et des Lettres by the French president. It was a moment of immense pride and a recognition of her cultural contribution, not just as a performer but as a global icon. While Europe celebrated her genius with open arms, her native America was, in many ways, slower to embrace her full brilliance. Still, Jessye Norman thrived. She appeared on television, recorded extensively, and enjoyed a level of admiration across Europe. In 1985, Jessye Norman was invited to sing at President Ronald Reagan's second inauguration, performing Simple Gifts from Aaron Copland's American Songs, a piece that perfectly captured her grace and sense of occasion. 12 years later, in 1997, she was again called upon to lend her voice to history, this time at President Bill Clinton's second inauguration. Jessye had become one of the most sought-after sopranos for events of national significance. Her influence extended far beyond the concert stage. The Secretary General of the United Nations appointed her as a UN ambassador, recognizing both her artistry and her global stature. She carried that role with pride, understanding the power of culture to bridge divides. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, Jessye didn't hesitate. She jumped on a plane and flew straight to Berlin, the city where her professional opera career had begun decades earlier. Now reunited, Berlin held deep meaning for her, and she spent time exploring the city she had once called home, reflecting on what it had become. Back in the opera world, 1990 saw Jessye return to the Metropolitan Opera in a role that showcased the full force of her voice. Sieglinde in Wagner's Die Walküre. The role required incredible vocal range, breath control, and emotional power, and Jessye delivered it all. When she launched into one of Sieglinde's most iconic lines, her voice soared above the massive orchestra, effortless and glorious. Many considered this her defining Wagnerian role. Her passion for Strauss remained strong. In the years that followed, she took on the role of Die Mutt in Feuersnot, performing at the breathtaking Salisbury Cathedral. In 1992, she starred in Oedipus Rex at the Saito Kinen Festival in Tokyo, a performance so charged with passion and precision that it intensified the opera's dramatic tension with every note. By this point, Jessye Norman was not just famous. She was a global sensation. Her voice, with its extraordinary size and depth, left audiences stunned and longing for more. One of her most celebrated recordings remains Richard Strauss's Wir letzte Lieder, conducted by Kurt Masur. The way he allowed her voice to bloom over Strauss's lush orchestration created what many still regard as the definitive version. Her stature made her a frequent presence at national ceremonies. In 1994, she sang at the funeral of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, a solemn and emotional moment. 2 years later, she performed at the 1996 Atlanta Olympic Games, an especially poignant honor as it took place in her home state of Georgia. In recognition of her influence and philanthropy, she was honored by New York's Associated Black Charities. Jessye had become more than a singer. She was a cultural icon. Known for her elegance, intellect, and striking fashion sense, she was a beloved figure in New York society, celebrated not just for her talent, but for the way she carried herself among the great and the good. In 2002, Jessye Norman lent her voice to the narrator role in The People's Passion, delivering it with the same beauty and grace that had defined her career. Around this time, she began to gradually step back from her operatic commitments, much like Renee Fleming would later do, choosing to exit the stage while still at the height of her powers. There was never a dramatic decline, no fading of brilliance. Her voice remained a marvel to the very end. But Jessye Norman was never defined by opera alone. Throughout her life, she was deeply passionate about preserving and promoting African-American musical traditions, especially spirituals, which were always a vital part of her repertoire. Her commitment to that legacy extended far beyond the concert hall. She collaborated with fellow soprano Kathleen Battle and composer Vangelis for a memorable performance at the Temple of Zeus in Athens, blending ancient setting with timeless music. And when Carnegie Hall asked her to curate a festival celebrating African-American culture, she titled it Honor, a fitting name for a project close to her heart. One of her proudest achievements was the founding of the Jessye Norman School of the Arts in her hometown of Augusta, Georgia. This free after-school program offered local children a chance to explore music, visual arts, dance, and creative writing. Her mission was clear: to give the next generation the best start possible through access to meaningful artistic education. Over her lifetime, Jessye received countless accolades, including the National Medal of Arts and the National Humanities Medal. But perhaps what set her apart most was her refusal to be boxed in. She embraced recitals, spirituals, jazz, and even explored the work of Duke Ellington later in her career, always open, always evolving. Jessye often described herself, first and foremost, as an African-American dramatic soprano from the South. She carried that identity with pride, knowing it informed every note she sang and every life she touched. From her home base, she continued to champion the values of music, solidarity, and education. principles she believed were just as important as any aria or encore. The phenomenon that was Jessye Norman has long been acknowledged for possessing one of the most beautiful and powerful voices the world has ever heard. Throughout her extraordinary career, she earned the admiration of audiences and critics alike. But beyond her talent, it was her deep self-worth, her unshakable vision, and her generosity of spirit that truly defined her. Jessye Norman will always hold her place among the great legends of opera, not just for the way she sang, but for the way she lived. Death and legacy. In 2015, Jessye Norman suffered a serious spinal cord injury, an event that marked the beginning of a difficult chapter in her life. On September 30th, 2019, she passed away at Mount Sinai Morningside Hospital in Manhattan at the age of 74. The official cause of death was listed as septic shock and multi-organ failure, stemming from complications related to that earlier spinal injury. In the years following her death, questions emerged about the medical care she had received. In September 2021, it was reported that her brother had filed a lawsuit alleging medical negligence during an operation she underwent in 2015. The case added a layer of sadness to an already tragic loss, as the world continued to grapple with her absence. Jessye Norman's public funeral was held in her hometown of Augusta, Georgia, a fitting tribute to the place that first nurtured her gift. The service drew an extraordinary group of speakers and performers, including actor Lawrence Fishburne, scholar Michael Eric Dyson, Carnegie Hall's Clive Gillinson, civil rights leader Vernon Jordan, and Augusta's mayor, Hardy Davis. Performances were offered by mezzo-soprano Janai Bridges, jazz musician Wycliffe Gordon, and students from Morehouse College, Spelman College, and the Jessye Norman School of the Arts. A few weeks later, on November 24, 2019, the Metropolitan Opera House in New York hosted a grand memorial gala in her honor. It was a celebration as rich and diverse as Jessye's life itself. Speakers and performers included Anna Deaver-Smith, Gloria Steinem, French cultural leader Jack Lang, bass baritone Eric Owens, and renowned organizations like the Dance Theater of Harlem and Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. Peter Gelb, general manager of the Met, paid tribute, as did fellow soprano Renee Fleming, highlighting the depth of admiration Jessye inspired across artistic and cultural spheres. Even years after her passing, her legacy continues to resonate. In September 2023, BBC Radio 4's Great Lives featured Jessye Norman as the subject of choice by celebrated double bassist Chichi Nwanoku, reminding listeners that the impact of her voice and her presence has not faded. Jessye Norman may be gone, but her story, her music, and her influence endure. What is Jessye Norman's net worth? At the time of her passing in 2019, Jessye Norman's estimated net worth was approximately $5 million. Her wealth was the result of a distinguished and decades-long career in opera, where she became one of the most celebrated dramatic sopranos of her generation. Norman earned significant income through her global performances on the world's most prestigious stages, from the Metropolitan Opera in New York to La Scala in Milan, and through her extensive recital tours and acclaimed recordings. Beyond the opera house, Norman also earned from speaking engagements, television appearances, and collaborations with cultural institutions. Her name carried prestige, and she was often invited to headline state occasions, including U.S. presidential inaugurations and international gala events. In addition to her music-related earnings, Norman was also a savvy investor in real estate and supported arts-related enterprises, including the Jessye Norman School of the Arts, a free after-school program in her hometown of Augusta, Georgia. Though rooted in philanthropy, her involvement in such institutions also reflected a strategic and meaningful use of her resources. Despite her success, Jessye Norman was known for living with grace and modesty. While she often wore haute couture gowns befitting her regal stage presence, she led a life focused more on purpose than extravagance. Her wealth was not only a reflection of her talent, but also of her commitment to using her success to uplift the next generation of artists. Inside Jessye Norman's home. Jessye Norman's home was a striking blend of elegance and serenity, much like the woman herself. Located in her hometown of Augusta, Georgia, the house was not only a private residence, but also a sanctuary filled with music, literature, and cultural treasures. While she traveled the world and lived in cities like London and New York during her illustrious career, it was this home in Georgia that remained closest to her heart. The property reflected Norman's deep appreciation for beauty and artistry. Its interiors were thoughtfully designed, featuring high ceilings, large windows, and an open layout that allowed for an abundance of natural light. The walls were lined with bookshelves and framed photographs, many capturing her iconic performances and personal moments with friends and global dignitaries. Her taste in decor leaned toward classic European influence, with rich fabrics, polished wood furniture, and statement art pieces collected from her travels. One of the standout spaces in the home was her music room, a peaceful corner where she practiced, reflected, and entertained guests. It housed her piano, recordings, and a curated collection of sheet music, much of it annotated by Jessye herself. Today, the house stands as a quiet monument to her extraordinary life. Though not open to the public, it remains a symbol of her connection to Augusta, a city she never forgot, and one that proudly claims her legacy. Locals often speak of the home with admiration, recognizing it as a place that nurtured the spirit of one of the greatest opera singers of all time. As the Jessye Norman School of the Arts continues her mission just miles away, her home remains a lasting piece of the world she so passionately shaped. Jessye Norman's life was nothing short of extraordinary, filled with music, meaning, and milestones that forever changed the world of opera. Her home, her legacy, and her voice continue to inspire even after her passing. What part of Jessye Norman's legacy moved you the most? Her voice, her home, or her dedication to education? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about iconic lives.